things in this world that I am extremely picky about. One of them is food and the other is books. So it came as a huge surprise to me when the only book that I rated 5 stars in 2024 was a book about food. Now this novel came out in May 2024 to mixed reviews. Some people loved it, some hated it, some couldn't really make up their mind about it. But if I had to use two words to define this book, I would say literary masterpiece. And this book is a rich, warm delight, pun intended, about the lives of women and how different women face misogyny in different ways in modern society. Because this is a novel that you cannot absolutely skip. And I'm talking about none other than Butter by Asako Yuzuki. Butter by Asako Yuzuki is a succinct commentary on society, how it treats women who are deemed to be defying the conventional standards placed upon them, and how food plays an important role not only as something that binds people together but also as something that is inherently a part of feminine desire. I'll start with the synopsis before breaking this video down into different parts of the book that I really enjoyed. Some part of this is an examination of the unhinged woman in literature. Some part of this video is also about the male loneliness epidemic. And towards the end, I'll also be reacting to 1-star reviews of this book that I think are not very well intended. So this book is from the perspective of Riko, a young journalist who wants to get an exclusive interview with Manako Kaiji. Manako Kaiji is an alleged serial killer waiting retrial in Tokyo prison facility. And her crime? She allegedly lured several different men into her trap, using them for their wealth or for their resources before getting rid of them one by one. Manako is a woman who does not fit conventional Japanese beauty standards, and this becomes one of her greatest flaws in the eyes of society, and not the fact that she has allegedly killed several men. Japanese society is not sure of how she lured those men in, apart from one concrete fact about her. Her cooking is so good that no one can resist her. Riko thinks that if she gets an exclusive interview with Manako, she can change public opinion of her and maybe even help in proving Manako innocent, as that is what Riko personally believes. Eventually, she succeeds in getting a one-on-one meeting with Manako by asking her for a recipe. These meetings soon take a dark turn as Riko finds herself reinventing herself when Manako asks Riko to become her tool in the outside world. She asks Riko to eat whatever she wants to eat and then come to Manako and explain the flavors that she has experienced in her own words. They form this sort of symbiotic relationship which eventually turns darker and darker and almost parasitic. This is a novel that is so nuanced and complex that you simply can't get enough of it. And once you start reading it, you won't be able to stop until you're done with it. And I think that is one of the best qualities of Butter by Asako Yuzuki. And the first point that I like to talk about is the unhinged woman in literature. The unhinged woman in literature is someone that all of us are familiar with. She is someone who engages in reclaiming her body and desires by engaging in nymphomaniac activity or substance abuse or borderline self-harm. This is a character that we come across in novels such as Boy Parts by Eliza Clark or My Year of Rest and Relaxation by Ottessa Moshfegh. But oftentimes, this is also a character who is so deeply stemmed in white privilege or wealth privilege that she is an uncritical examination of feminism, and how oftentimes this type of feminism leaves out women who are marginalized in some other ways by society. The unhinged female character, especially if we take the example of the protagonist in My Year of Rest and Relaxation, is someone who already comes from a position of privilege, a conventionally attractive woman whose feminism is more male-centered and female-isolating than otherwise. This sort of feminism oftentimes also relies on racial stereotyping and isolation of women who do not meet conventional beauty standards of society. In Butter by Asako Yuzuki, we see a more critical examination of the unhinged woman through the eyes of Riko when she looks at Manako Kaiji. Manako Kaiji's most iconic line in this novel is that she hates nothing more than feminists and margarine. Manako Kaiji is a textbook traditional wife. She is someone who believes that women belong in the kitchen and that feminism is a true loss to society. And as we read, we learn that Manako's mentality is a tragedy. because she has developed this thought process after she has been denied female companionship in her life due to not fitting into the social standards of femininity or beauty that were imposed upon her. It's a very interesting portrayal of how urban non-intersectional feminism can be very damaging and ostracize women who do not fit into the conventional idea of what a woman should be. This is something that we oftentimes see when radical feminists discuss trans women and also women who have traditionally masculine features, especially Arab women or brown woman. And through the eyes of Manako Kaiji, we see a reclamation of that narrative when we read about how she was ostracized to such an extent that she somehow internalized that and became this misogynistic woman who sees all other women in contempt without being able to realize that this is the result of a patriarchal mindset that not only affects her but also affects the conventionally attractive women who see themselves as feminists. When Riko goes through this, she treats this as the tragedy that it is. It is not powerful or subversive for Manako to step into the shoes of a traditional wife and sacrifice her life in subservience to the men around her. No, rather it is a huge tragedy for her never to be able to gain female companionship and never to be able to connect with other women fully, because even in urban society women are divided amongst each other because of patriarchal impositions. Oftentimes we have this saying that a woman is another woman's greatest enemy, and this novel critically examines that statement by spelling the words out that a woman is not another woman's enemy, but it is a misogynistic society that drives us against each other when we perceive each other as someone who is defiant towards the rules and set of laws of feminine behavior that have been thrust upon us. I feel like a lot of modern novels that particularly emphasize on male-centered feminism or reclamation of the female body by sexual liberation can really benefit from going through Butter by Asako Yuzuki, because this book is absolute chef's kiss when it comes to discussing feminism and how oftentimes feminism can also be harmful to those women that are different from societal standards. Manako's character is such a nuanced, multi-layered character because at the end of the day, she is a woman who is so lonely that her loneliness manifests itself in the form of hatred towards other women. And Riko, another woman who is overcome by urban loneliness, learns that the only way to not let your loneliness consume you is to go out of your way and create connections not only with other women but also with other men and other people, so that you have a small circle of your own, because loneliness can only be thwarted by companionship, and that companionship can come in many different ways. The reason why Manako is so bitter, the reason why Manako feels so inclined towards servicing other men is because she has never been able to gain a platonic love in her entire life. The only way she can make herself useful is when she feels desired by other people, because no one has ever loved her for herself. And that, I think, is a very interesting depiction of internalized misogyny and the mindset of different women nowadays who believe that being a traditional housewife is the epitome of success and things like going to school or education are worthless. I mean, I came across few of these reels on Instagram and a few TikToks on TikTok about some female presenting people writing monologues on how all they would like in their entire life is to be subservient to a husband and not worry about working a day in their life. This idea that you can happily go through your life while being completely dependent on another person comes from a position of financial privilege and always entails some degree of financial abuse along with it. And I find that no other novel has discussed this so beautifully as Butter by Asako Yuzuki. Moving on to another part that I thought was really interesting, and that is the male loneliness epidemic. The male loneliness epidemic is, as the name suggests, a situation where most modern men claim that they are lonely. Since 1990, only 12% of men report having a friend or someone with whom they can share their daily struggles. Now, the male loneliness epidemic is often called a silent struggle, but that is not entirely true because there are dozens of research paper theories and ways on how the male loneliness epidemic can be thwarted. And The reason why this novel is a very scathing critique of the male loneliness epidemic is that women are oftentimes made the scapegoat for male loneliness. No one really examines the fact that men are lonely because patriarchal society is built in such a way where men are pumped up to be the protectors and the providers who have no need for emotional connection, while women are made up to be the feeble emotional person of the nuclear family structure. But instead of focusing on that, it is oftentimes made out to be the fault of women that men are lonely, and women are the ones who need to mother men in order to prevent their loneliness. Butter is an extremely critical examination and a scathing critique of the male loneliness epidemic, as it showcases how no one can help you unless you are helping yourself. It is not the responsibility of women to pick men up, mother them, baby them, and nurture them back into being a functioning human being if that man himself does not help himself in any way. And oftentimes, these are the very same men who level women with verbal or physical abuse when those women are trying to fix him. This is also very interesting idea to have in the I can fix him generation, where oftentimes women are manipulated into believing that it is their responsibility to take care of men who are either mentally or emotionally unwell or unfit for human connection. And oftentimes the issues faced by these women, the trauma that is leveled upon these women by the emotionally unavailable men, goes unseen or unheard because all of us are too busy focusing on the male loneliness epidemic. The reason why the male loneliness epidemic cannot be solved is because men are not willing to solve it themselves. A lonely man will forever be lonely if you put him in a room filled with people, if he does not talk to anyone. It is not the responsibility of other people to come save you. It is your responsibility to make sure that you are receptive of the help that is being provided to you. And Butter is an excellent portrayal of that. When Riko realizes that in some way or another she has become like one of those men, like her father, like her colleagues, who in no way try to help themselves and simply bemoan the fact that the women in their life have given up on them, she takes up the initiative to make herself better. She takes up the initiative to connect with different people, her best friend, her colleagues, her seniors, anyone and everyone, and trying to surround herself with people with whom she can talk, because she comes to the conclusion that in life you don't need much more than a shoulder to cry on and good food on your table. I find that there are very few novels that actually critically examine the male loneliness epidemic and its effects on women who are made the scapegoat of the epidemic or blamed because of it. Nowadays you'll be seeing some posts like how AI girlfriends will cure the male loneliness epidemic, but in my opinion they will probably make it worse. I mean, if you have seen Her, you know how that story ends, right? Anyways, let's move on to food as a metaphor for desire. After Riko meets Manako Kaiji, she starts reclaiming her suppressed desires through a gastronomic journey, through reclaiming the flavors on her tongue, through reclaiming her food palette rather than going for cheap store-bought meals that leave the room for more open. She not only begins to cook for herself, but she also begins to go on a diverse journey of culinary arts. She tries different foods and ultimately on this journey she begins to gain weight. And this weight gain vilifies her in the eyes of her boyfriend, her best friend, and in the eyes of general Japanese society. Riko is a woman who spent most of her life being underweight, and now that she has come to a healthy weight, most people start viewing her as someone who no longer puts effort into their appearance. And this was one of the most hard-hitting parts of the novel, because you can actually feel and realize, especially Asian countries impose severe beauty standards on women that oftentimes come at the cost of the physical neglect of the woman herself. I mean, Riko, who was maintaining at 49 kgs for most of her life, was a woman who was severely underfed, and her weight gain proves that she now had the energy to take care of herself to a greater extent. This reclamation of her desire and this reclamation of her own autonomy, especially when it comes to deciding what's the right amount for her body, the right amount of food, the right amount for human connection, the right amount of happiness and sadness, she also realizes that food is something that is to be enjoyed in its simplicity. In sharp contrast to Manako Kaiji, who focuses on more impressive traditional recipes that are made to please the men around her. while Riko and her best friend focus on simple home-cooked meals in order to reclaim their desires for themselves. Manago views food as a tool to make herself more desirable to other people, and this use of food to showcase how this necessity has become a tool that can be both used to oppress and liberate women is an excellent portrayal. Now, oftentimes we hear this, even though women cook more than men, most of the major chefs that we see IRL tend to be men. And this novel also digs a bit deeper into that. Food, when it comes to women, is seen as something that they should be doing as a responsibility and nothing that they should be applauded for. But food, when it comes to men, is something that is an art. When men cook, it's impressive. It's an art style, it's a creation, but when women cook, it's a responsibility, and oftentimes women are only cooking for those around them and not for themselves. When Riko starts cooking for herself and then she starts cooking for the people she loves in a way that she would cook for herself, she starts to understand that food plays a much more important role in not only her own life but also in the lives of others. And overall, that this book is so nuanced in its portrayal of food and feminism and everything that interconnects those two topics, that there can absolutely be no other book that can do it as well as this book does it. I mean, when we talk a bit more about feminist novels, if you watch my video on Lady Macbeth by Eva Reid and how feminist retellings and feminist novels in general tend to isolate the female protagonist from other secondary female characters in order to showcase how the female character is more feminist or more good in comparison to her counterparts, and this leads to a narrative which is not really feminist in its true sense, as it does not showcase the nuances or intersectionality that comes along with feminism. And this is a trap that Butter avoids falling into, because every female character in this novel is multidimensional, well written and well rounded, and their character arcs are a true reflection of how societal misogyny pervades their life and has had a pervasive effect on how they see themselves, how they see other people, and how they interact with other women in particular. This is a novel that is going to be a modern classic, and you can take my word for it. If you have not read Butter by Asako Yuzuki, stop waiting, read this book before you read anything else, because this is a true masterpiece filled with decadent descriptions of food. This made me crave things like ramen, sushi and different Japanese cuisines multiple times, to the point that I was salivating while reading this. But this is also a very good portrayal of female desire, palatability politics, and how women always have to put more effort into their bodies in order to be seen as someone worth knowing in the eyes of general society. Now, when I was going through the Goodreads reviews, I noticed a few things about how most of the reviews that hated this book were usually about the book being too long or the book being not a thriller. Now, I'm a bit confused about why so many different people perceive this novel to be a thriller, because I, for one, picked Butter up with no prior information of the novel. I went to a random bookstore that I had never been in before. I was attracted by the cover, I read the synopsis, and while reading it, I in no way thought that it was going to be a thriller. I more or less perceived it to be a social commentary or literary fiction, which it did turn out to be. Nothing in the synopsis really makes you think that it's going to be a thriller, other than the fact that it's about a journalist and a serial killer who is oddly interested in her. In the marketing campaigns that I was not privy to, that this book was pushed as a thriller. More or less, even the synopsis of the book reminded me of The Vegetarian by Han Kang or A Certain Hunger, which are all novels about women reclaiming their desires by changing their food palette or through the act of consuming or not consuming food. Anyways, let's look at some of the one-star reviews, and I'll also give you a bit insight onto why I don't necessarily agree with those reviews or why my viewpoints differ from those reviews. I mean, I really disagree with this review on like a principle basis, because those descriptions of food were not boring at all. I was salivating through like half of this novel because of how intricate and beautifully written the food descriptions were, and that those were one of the part where the author's prose really shone through. I mean, yeah, it could be a bit boring to people with shorter attention spans, but overall, I don't really agree with the fact that there was no plot in this book, because this novel is extremely plot heavy. A lot of this book is Rico trying to understand Manako and going through different trials and tribulations in order to do so, which involves visiting Manako's hometown, going through feuds with her best friend, her own relationship with her boyfriend. Saying that this novel does not have any plot is like admitting that you read only 50 pages before stopping. And I guess that's why it was a DNF for you. And again, as I said, on a principle basis, in my opinion, if you have not read a book fully, you do not get to leave a review on it. Even if you have read 90% of the novel, I don't essentially think you have any right to review it, because you did not read that novel, you did not finish it, you do not know what happens till the end. Even if you skimmed through the pages, which I think a lot of reviewers tend to do, I do not think you should be leaving a review, because obviously you are not valuing this work of art in the way that it needs to be valued. If you have not watched a movie fully, you don't get to leave a review for it. If you stopped watching a TV show after 2 episodes, you don't get to leave a review for it. So even if you read 12 chapters and left the other 8, you don't get to review it, simply because you did not read it completely. If you did not have the attention span or the requisites to read a novel fully, then you have no right to leave a 1-star, 2-star, 3-star, even a 5-star review because you did not read it fully. I mean, I thought that was just common sense. I mean, it may be an unpopular opinion of mine, but if I DNF books from the past 2 years onwards, ever since I gained the maturity to comprehend it, I do not leave reviews. If I DNF'd it, I DNF'd it, and even if I do leave a review, I leave it without stars and with only reasons about why I DNF'd that novel, and not really a concrete review. Because there might be a possibility that the last 50 pages of that book may pump up the star rating that I left. So if I did not finish it, that's a me problem and not really an author problem. This is a review which is probably written by someone who does not live in an East Asian or even an Asian country, because Asian countries really do tend to be strict about their beauty standards. And yes, women do get called fat when they are 5'2" and 59 kgs in such a country, because these countries oftentimes emphasize on women starving themselves in order to look palatable to other people. I mean, this is something that we see a lot in South Korea with the K-pop industry, where artists oftentimes admit to starving themselves because they are so afraid of gaining weight. And these nations also have the highest rate of eating disorders. I think this is also a bit rooted in the fact that women of color and their mental illnesses are not taken very seriously. Their body image issues, their eating disorders, their self-esteem issues or body dysmorphia are not taken as seriously as Western women find theirs to be taken, or how women of color are more easily dehumanized in comparison to their white counterparts. That's just my 2 cents on it. It's not really a personal attack against the reviewer, but it also feels like this review is not really well intended or does not really come from a place of criticism rather than a place of personal attack, because there is no necessity to really mention the fact that there is a woman in this novel who is being called fat by specifically stating her weight or height, because that does not negate the fact that even if in your country she might not be perceived as someone who is not conventionally beautiful, but in her country she is facing discrimination based on her appearance, especially when that discrimination is a very important part of this novel. I find that a lot of critique about this novel really hinge on the fact that there is a lack of plot, or that it was not a thriller, or the serial killer aspect was not utilized to its full potential. And I find all of that to be very misleading, because in my opinion, every aspect of this book was utilized to its full potential. There is a plot, as I mentioned so many different times. There is thick social commentary. This book is a literary fiction and it's 400 pages to boot. So obviously it's not a novel for everyone. But then again, to insult this novel when it is a very important piece of social commentary just feels wrong to me. I mean, if you started reading this novel expecting a cat and mouse chase between a serial killer and a journalist with thriller as a psychological thriller with violence in it, you were wrong. And that does not sound like a fault of the novel itself. Nowhere in the synopsis is there any indication that this is going to be a psychological thriller? This book is shelved as a literary fiction. Most bookstores will keep it in the literary fiction section, or keep it in just the novel section and not in the thriller section. It's one of the major reasons why I really tend to dislike critiques of Butter by Asako Yuzuki, because yes, you are entitled to your own opinion, but then again, without any substantial backing behind your opinion, it does not really feel like an opinion that cannot be disregarded. When it comes especially to book reviews, I really hate it when reviewers, even if they are leaving a negative review or a positive review, don't really comment on the objective facts of the book, but only water it down to being a boring novel, rather being a boring novel. And that, I think, can be attributed to how many reviewers have a cult of personality. That is, more people are attracted to their personality or their looks rather than their ability to comprehensively or cohesively talk about the books that they are discussing. But that is a topic for another video and another day. Anyways, if you enjoyed my review of Butter by Asako Yuzuki, make sure to like, comment and subscribe, and hit the bell icon so that you always know when I am posting a new video. And this is going to be my third video of the month, so be proud of me for being more or less regular poster. Anyways, thank you for watching, be safe and bye bye.